Thank you all for coming out. I know it's a difficult time right after lunch, and there's a huge risk of food coma, and I hope most of you will live through this talk. I would also like to thank the organizers of this conference for the brilliant work they've been doing so far. So in putting together the whole thing and running it, I think it's incredibly important, especially here in Eastern Europe, to bring together lots of individuals and organizations united in their goal to create a better world for animals. So please give them a warm round of applause for what they've been doing. It's amazing. Right. And to get you out of the food coma, I'm probably going to throw in a couple of quiz elements here and there to see whether you're still awake. There's a very famous African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Anyone ever heard of that proverb? Is that? Oh, good. I think I like it a lot. I think it's excellent African wisdom. And how is it relevant for our cause here? I think it's incredibly relevant because it kind of encapsulates or sums up two strategies or mindsets that are quite common in our movement. There's the fast mindset and the far mindset. What are you in favor of? Imagine you have to choose. Ideally, of course, you want to have both, right? You want to go very far with what you do, and you also want to reach that goal very fast. But if you have to choose, because the world is, as we know, not ideal, you have to choose one over the other, which one would it be? Who would choose a fast strategy over a far strategy? Can I see hands?
It's not on.
What? That's a projector issue. The computer's fine. So we could use the time with a show of hands. So who's for the fast strategy? Anyone in here raise their hands? Do something fast? It's David, yeah, naturally. Another one. Who's for far over fast? That looks like quite a majority to me. Okay, I totally agree with you. I also think going far is probably the better thing than going fast. However, I think we should still be doing much more of the far aspects in our work. And I don't know how fast I should progress now, because if I can't show you the slides, it makes even less sense what I'm saying. Explain the slides. Could you come up front and dance them for me, maybe? Just illustrate that, express yourself and all. Okay, let's try to collect a bit. What do you think? What are the benefits of a fast strategy? Just shout it out. What is a benefit of a fast strategy if you do something fast? Come again? Momentum, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Right. Are there any downsides to that strategy? The fast strategy? What are the Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, that was my fault. Can you just repeat again? Momentum. What was yours again? Satisfaction. Instant satisfaction. Right. You see the results immediately. You've got something tangible, right? There was something else from the Danish side, but I'm not quite sure whether I should. Yeah. How fast you can react to things. What are the downsides of this strategy of going fast? It might not be sustainable, right? That's a big issue. Right? You have a fast achievement, but it might just think of the studies we see with the way people transition to a plant-based lifestyle. There are lots of evidence that shows us that the faster people transition, the less sustainable it seems to be. So there's a high rate of recidivism, apparently. Right. It's overwhelming. Okay. Yeah, it might not be the most effective. That's a question of how you define effectiveness, of course, but yeah. And in terms of the FAR strategy, I think we can just reverse things, right? So what you have with the FAR strategy is you have rather large-scale systemic change. It's probably not immediately tangible. You probably don't have the risk of backlashes as with the FAR strategy. And of course, the downside is you don't have these tangible results. Right? You work towards a goal, and you don't have the results immediately. It takes a longer period of time. How are we doing with that thing up there? Not that good, apparently. Okay. It's a shame because lots of things depend on visuals, actually. And it sucks a lot if I just talk about it. So I also think we should consider more of the FAST strategy, because the FAST strategy is associated with short-term thinking and also with doing things on your own. And I think that is one of the major blind spots of human beings in general. Right? Most of the problems, most of the most pressing problems we are facing today are actually the result of short-term thinking. Like, for example, you could see some pictures now, which is like climate change, environmental degradation, health issues, right? Imagine people smoke, right? It's an instant gratification, makes a lot of sense for them at this very moment. In the long run, however, it's not that good a strategy. Food injustice is also one of the results of short-term thinking. And of course, the cause that unites us all here, which is animal suffering. People have this short-term bias in favor of, or rather ready to sacrifice long-term benefits for short-term rewards. And I think that is probably one of the major issues we have as a human race, given the state of the world we live in today. We're not making progress. Okay. So the reason why I'm in favor of the FAST strategy rather than the FAST strategy is because it's more in alignment with what we should, as human beings, be doing anyway. That is more long-term thinking and creating sustainable change and large-scale change. Maybe we can use the TV screen down there and put it up there, so that would be at least something like a mini screen for people to follow. If you want to do that, we can do that. You want us to take a short break for them to fix the technical side of things?
Yeah, we'll take 10 minutes quickly to fix it, or 5 or 10 minutes to fix it, and then resume the...
Okay. No. I was hoping on David to come on stage and do something, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Be back in a couple of minutes. We'll try and figure this out here. No, it's fine. Thank you. Yeah, the man's name is Martin, and he eventually fixed it. It was a long chain of mishaps that probably maybe some from the meat industry is involved. I don't know. They tried it, but they wouldn't succeed. Okay. Let me just check how far we got. Yeah, we ended up, we didn't get that far, which is kind of ironic, talking about the FAST strategy. So I was trying to make the point that I think it is very important that we do more of the FAST strategy, long-term thinking, rather than short-term thinking and successes. Because apparently lots of what we as human beings are doing is focused very much on the short term, and it's causing lots of the problems we are facing nowadays, including animal suffering and a whole bad litany of other things, apparently. And the other thing why I believe we should focus on the FAST strategy rather than the FAST strategy is that our goal is still quite far away. That is where we want to go, right? We want to have a vegan world, plant-based world, a world without suffering, where everyone chooses delicious and healthy food, which is good for all humans, animals, and our planet. But not to get hopes too high, this is still quite far away. right? So the distance to get there is quite far. We tend to live in the vegan bubble in the movement sometimes and feel like, okay, vegan revolution is just ahead, but looking out there and at the increase of animal product consumption around the world, it's not that we're here, it's more like here. Right, so let me briefly talk about what I call the evolution of activism and why I think this is a very good moment in time to speak about collective efforts and how to improve them. What do you think is the first level or stage of evolution of activism? Very often it's the same case with individuals, so that's probably my personal evolution, but maybe also true for others, and I think also for the movement in general. How does activism start? On what level? Just shout it out. Facebook rage. Okay, that was before my time. But you could do that as an individual, yeah. So yes. Let's not go there. It's individuals, right? Or small groups, basically, that start being concerned about a certain thing and want to change that. The next level is, any ideas? What do individuals do if they feel they need to do more? They come together, right? They form organizations. So that's a corporation on the level where people, like-minded people, come together, think of how to divide their labor in a strategic way and be more effective and create more impact. And of course, there are lots of great organizations out there. And I think we are at a very important and also very thrilling time at this moment where we see lots of big organizations developing in a very short time from small groups into almost international or global organizations doing an amazing job. I've just put a couple of them here. I probably missed some of them. You can give me an evil eye now if you feel like I forgot someone, tell me later on then. But I think there are lots of them around the world. It's really impressive to see what all of them are doing. And in what short time span this has developed. It's amazing. The next level of activist evolution is alliances or coalitions. So that is when organizations come together because they share some interest or goal and think that if they combine their effort, it might be the best solution to move forward. And there are lots of them out there as well, so just a couple of them to show you what I have in mind with that. And I feel, because we have both of these things present now, so lots of very good organizations doing amazing work and also very good first steps towards cooperating, I think we should also consider something that is called collective impact theory. That's another mode of taking collaboration to the next level, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Let me briefly talk about 50 by 40, because that is at the center of this talk and this idea of cooperating. I work with ProVeg, that's an international food awareness organization, and we're trying to change, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the global food system by promoting plant-based, cell-based alternatives to the standard traditional animal products out there. And we believe that our food choices can become a multi-problem solution because lots of the problems I illustrated before are to some extent related to our food choices. What we put on our plates has an enormous effect on ourselves, on the planet, on the animals. We have a very inclusive approach. So we tried to appeal to all motivations. It's not just the animals we're talking about. We're also talking about health, how it's a benefit if you change your diet. We also talk about the environment and the impact our current diets have on the environment. We talk about food justice, of course, in order to appeal to as many people as possible and to appeal to as many motivations as possible. And we also want to reach out to as many target groups as possible. So we don't try just to appeal to the vegans because they already know and understand. We especially want to appeal to those who have not yet made the final step towards plant-based nutrition. So we are very open to targeting and coming into a conversation with people who want to reduce their meat or animal product intake, as well as vegetarians and so on. And of course, we want to be very inclusive in terms of the country, so we're trying to tackle a global problem with a global approach, including as many countries as possible. We're also very solution-focused. Right? We don't show the problems that much, just a little nudge sometimes, but usually we try to focus on the solutions to the problems and on the incentives that exist, and try to create more incentives for people and institutions to move that way. And we also try to work very much on the institutional level, because we think that's a very important complement to the work that many others do, who work more on the individual level, trying to convince individuals about changing their diet. We believe it's also important that they find an environment where they can actually translate that into action. So we need changes in the political system, we need changes in the economic system for people to be able to do what we consider very easy, going vegan, which is probably true for all of us in here as we are activists, but apparently it's not as easier for most other people, or else the world would be probably a very different one. So we try to be kind of a Swiss Army knife a bit when it comes to that, so solving a couple of problems and appealing to a couple of interests to solve these problems, and of course the animals will benefit from this as well. This organization has been founded by 3 people you might know: Melanie Joy, her husband Sebastian, and Tobias Lehnert, 3 activists and leaders who have lots of experience with the vegan and animal rights movement, and identified one gap that needed to be filled, and that is a global vegan or plant-based food awareness organization. That's how they came to create ProVeg. We were recognized as a standout charity by animal charity evaluators, as one of the most effective animal charities, and probably the most effective one not using animal messaging in the first place, because we try to focus on other areas. Right. So this is our vision at ProVeg. We want a world where everyone chooses delicious and healthy food. It's good for all humans, animals, and the planet. Apparently a very holistic approach. And it's a very ambitious goal. We are aware of that. And in order to get something more tangible, we also defined milestones. And the central milestone we have is called our Mission 50 by 40. That means reducing global animal consumption by 50% by the year 2040. That's still quite ambitious, we know, but it's something more tangible than just saying, yeah, we want a vegan world in the long run. That's the idea behind this. Some key facts so you understand what this is based on. The baseline for this is 2017, so compared to that baseline, we want to reduce the amount of animal products being consumed. We include all species and all products, so we want to avoid shifts like, for example, the environmental movement very often is in favor of shifting from red meat to white meat because it makes sense from the environmental perspective. However, if you replace, let's say, cows with fish from an animal rights perspective, it's a huge ethical disaster because the numbers increase dramatically. So that's why we decided to avoid these unwelcome shifts, and at the same time also attract as many stakeholders as possible, because we don't just want to appeal to the animal advocates, we also need to appeal to environmental advocates. We decided to have all the species and all the products included and then reduce their numbers respectively. We also want to make sure it's a fair approach, so there are some regions that are over-consuming at the moment. They should drastically reduce, and there are other regions in the world where consumption is only slowly taking off ground at the moment, and we want to be mindful of this as well and make sure that we do not treat everyone equally, but start with those who make the biggest contribution to the problem at the moment, which is the rich and wealthy countries most of us live in. Right, and it's very important, this goal is both scientifically informed, so we had lots of conversations with leading scientists who did the maths behind that, and we also needed something that is psychologically appealing, so people have a grasp of that. Maybe saying, let's reduce 75% by 2100 would be too far away, right? Not something that is really tangible, and something maybe outside of your own lifespan. So these were all the kind of considerations that went into this kind of thinking. And the interesting thing now was, when we came up with this mission, we got lots of interest in it. And lots of people got quite excited about that, which gave us pause to think and reflect that it might be not a good idea just to use it as a mission for an organization and just build some campaign around it. But we were starting to think about utilizing that in a more efficient and effective way to create a better world for animals. And we came up with basically two two solutions or two avenues we want to explore further. And the first one is the 50 by 40 Corporate Outreach Alliance. And that's kind of a very first step towards that. We had the Corporate Outreach Summit earlier this year in Berlin, where we had 160 representatives from 35 NGOs from over 30 countries convening in Berlin and sharing best practices in the field of corporate outreach. We did that together with the Humane Society of the United States as a collaboration, and it was a huge success. You might wonder why corporate outreach in the first place. We believe that this is an increasingly important field, given that we have this kind of veggie boom, veggie products appearing everywhere at the moment. So the industry is interested in that. There's money to be made. It's an institutional focus, so it has potentially large impact. That's something we are always interested in, creating this more veg-friendly environment. It is usually a very positive and incentivizing approach, so people get on board if you tell them it's also in their own interest to do that, so that's why corporate outreach probably has this huge potential. And of course, lots of the corporations are going international even more nowadays, and that was another idea to also make sure that the corporate outreach efforts in our space follow suit and don't get left behind. We did some surveys before and afterwards, and some of the key needs that we identified from the attendees there, what their wishes were, what they would like to get out of something like this was they would like to share best practices, of course, and learn from other groups. It was really impressive to see that it was very mutual and on eye level, so everyone was ready to learn from everyone, small groups from bigger groups from smaller groups. That was really, really inspiring. Networking was very important and identifying possibilities for cooperation, of course, and of course, how to attract more funding and how to scale it up for corporate outreach activities. So the next steps we're going to take with this was the very first step, this summit, to just figure out and see how it goes down with people, whether there's some interest in that, and it was also very much overbooked. We had planned for, I think, around 80, David? Correct me if I'm wrong, 80 people, it almost doubled. So there is some interest apparently in that. And currently we're trying to come up with an ideal framework for the next step, which would be kind of a corporate outreach alliance based on the 50 by 40 goal. There will be three main work streams that will be focusing on food services or catering, rankings, especially retailers, restaurants and airlines, and functional ingredients management, so how to help companies and corporations reduce the amount of animal products or animal ingredients they have in their products. And of course, there will be some benefits for everyone who's in this alliance. There will be shared best practices in form of manuals. There will be outreach material, media outreach material, and also common templates to report impact and measure that afterwards. So the benefits are quite obvious, right? So inside the movement, we will strengthen the movement by sharing best practices, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, but we can learn from the best and maybe build on that and improve that, even that. We can learn collectively rather than just trying to figure it out all by ourselves again. And to the outside world, it also sends a strong message, because now we are a stronger voice, right? If we want to approach someone, they're more likely to listen if it's a whole alliance speaking to them, representing a couple of initiatives, organizations and groups, compared to just one organization or one individual approaching them. And it's also probably a benefit in terms of increasing funding, because it might be more attractive to funders. And there's another benefit, it's David Peterson. He's over there, he's a funny guy, and he's also in charge of lots of the things. So should you later on have any more specific questions, he's the right person to talk to, and he's also quite some fun. Right, so the second avenue, so that's the kind of the first thing that came to mind, creating this 50 by 40 Corporate Outreach Alliance, and it looks like a really promising thing to do. But we want to think even bigger than that, and that's why we've still in the planning phase come up with an idea that's called 50by40.org. And that would be something like a a broader alliance, not just an alliance within the animal rights movement, not just an alliance focused on corporate outreach. It will transcend both of these aspects. So the idea is that we have a platform for large-scale cross-sector collaboration. So that means we try to reach out not only to the NGO space or the animal rights space or the vegan space, we want to reach out to other NGOs, like health and environment NGOs, human rights NGOs as well, because there are lots of intersections and overlaps. And we also want to reach out to other sectors outside of the NGO space. So governmental institutions, of course, healthcare sector, political sector, the academia, and so on, media, of course. And this platform is inspired, at least in this planning phase, to some extent by collective impact theory. And for those of you who don't know about it or care to know more about it, I'm briefly going to talk a bit about this idea. We are not trying to blindly just copy this one-to-one from theory into our plans, but we are looking into that at the moment to identify which of these elements make sense. So collective impact is premised on the fact that no single organization or program or individual can tackle complex social problems. And many of the problems I talked about at the beginning are very complex. And I think changing the food system and getting rid of animal products in the long run is a very complex social issue. So the core idea of this approach is that we have a multiplicity of actors, not just one NGO or not just an alliance of a couple of NGOs, but we have lots of different actors from different sectors of society. They follow a common agenda, and they use a very structured form of collaboration. And what they have in mind is not just some change here or some company changing their policies or maybe just some area changing their policies. What they want is large-scale and long-term systemic change. And that's why when you want to change the food system globally, you're all ears when you hear about a theory that promises to bring about or help bring about systemic change. There are 5 basic elements to this theory, which I'm only going to skim a bit to give you some rough idea what this could be about. So you have a common agenda that informs the strategy and the goals, and everyone within this alliance then. You have shared measurement systems, which is very important in order to be able to assess your progress. So you share these measurement systems in order to compare stuff. You've got mutually reinforcing activities. So of course, not everyone is doing the same thing. People are doing very different things. Organizations have very different approaches. It's important to align them in a way and orchestrate them in a way that they kind of reinforce each other rather than cannibalize each other. And you have continuous and a very open communication. So you need to exchange ideas. You need to have common ground when it comes to that. And ideally, that's part of this theory, you have a backbone organization that is one entity that is separate from the other organizations, that is kind of in charge of the logistics and also of the financials, doing all the work, the coordination, so that the organizations themselves can focus on what they're really good at. That's their core work. And that's kind of the idea of how to maybe create this kind of backbone organization, an independent entity. To give you some idea about the difference between collaboration and collective impact, because you might think, what's the difference actually? Isn't it just another form of collaboration? I try to juxtapose them here, maybe it becomes a little bit clearer. So the one thing is acting together, that's like what we do in coalitions and stuff like that. And collective impact is more like acting in concert, right? It's much, much more than that. You really align your individual actions much more, you plan them ahead. Then collaboration usually starts out with your own agenda. Organizations have their own agenda, and then they have some common goal they identify that other organizations or players might also have, and then they kind of try to work together towards that goal in order to further their own agendas usually. With collective impact, it's the other way around. So you agree on a common agenda, let's say reducing animal consumption by 50% by 2040 would be some common agenda you could share on, and then you try to understand how you can contribute to that goal with the activities you're doing anyway. So is it really a contribution or is it not really helpful? That would be the way to go about this. So it's not about changing what you're doing, but rather having a bigger alignment in terms of a cooperation. Just to show this or illustrate this a bit more, what you see on the ground level would be isolated impact. That's what's happening when different organizations or actors just do their thing, right? They might poke the system here and they might poke the system there a bit. Someone is doing a corporate outreach campaign, other people are doing a political outreach campaign. They're trying to, of course, work for the same cause, but attack or deal with the system in a very uncoordinated way. Then you have cumulative impact, which is basically the fact or what happens when people work together, when organizations form coalitions or alliances. Then you all go in the same direction, but you don't probably hit the target or the target group in the weak spot. And that's only what happens if you really align the activities, like in collective impact. Ideally, then they all kind of are nicely aligned and hit the most effective spot. That's, of course, all theory. It looks pretty nice like that. The normal world is much more complex, we know that. So we are trying to analyze these aspects and identify what might make sense for creating a bigger thing in order to help more animals. You might feel like this now, maybe. Think, nah, why would I do that? Why would we collaborate? Isn't there a risk in that? Well, I think, of course, the major reason to collaborate is we've got a huge problem we want to tackle, which is animal suffering, which is the food system. And of course, we need to work together to some extent. But why should we agree on the same agenda? Right? Why should we share information and insights beforehand? Why should we also share the limelight afterwards? Right? So if you achieve something with your own organization, you get all the attention. Why share that? And I think behind this is a very, very understandable and realistic concern. It's about one's own identity as an organization. And I think identity is very important for two reasons. It's intrinsically important because we identify as human beings with groups and with the things we do. We invest emotionally. It's very important what we do. And that's a good thing because it keeps us going to some extent. But it's also instrumentally important, right? The identity of an organization is important because we feel if we can't show that we do an effective work or that we don't have any impact for the animals or that we don't get the limelight, that maybe we don't get the funding because funders might say, I want to see results. And I think sometimes there is a conflict between what is best for the cause and between what is best for my organization. That's a realistic conflict that sometimes exists. And then we need to ask ourselves difficult questions. And the other thing is that this whole collective impact is not about growing organizations. It's about growing the impact of the whole movement, of the whole cause area. So there might sometimes be conflicts. There's also some good news, however, because also as there's a shift towards collective impact on the activist side, there's also a shift on the funders side. So there's a new platform called Co-Impact, which is kind of a collective of funders, including the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have already kind of identified the possibilities of systems change. So they want to fund and support initiatives that explicitly want to change systems rather than just singling out individual organizations who do the best job in one specific area. So there seems to be quite some interest in that, and as far as I understand, they also are ready to put out lots of grants in the near future. I'm going to skip a couple of things just to not overrun too far. So our goal is still far away. That's one of the premises I made at the beginning. So I feel that if we want to bridge that long distance, one of the things we could do is use something like 50 by 40, which is not the idea of just one organization, which could be something like a mission or a kind of an intermediate goal to get many people aligned behind, maybe to start off with something like a corporate outreach alliance, but in the long run maybe even create something bigger that gets all sectors of society on board in order to make this change happen that we're all seeking. And I would like to end with a quote by Barbara Mikulski. She said, "Each of us can make a difference. Together we can make change." And change, I think, is what we direly need in terms of our current food system for the animals, for the human beings, for the environment, and for our health. So, thank you. I think
We have our keynote address happening in just a few minutes. If you'd like to stick around for that, it's our final talk of the day. Yeah, she has it. She has it here, I think. Yeah. Or stage one. No, stage one. Good job. No, it's man, it's stressful. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for the applause. Oh yeah. It's oh my God. Here, Gabloza. Here? Or maybe this one. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah. We tried it. Well, I like to be more sure. I removed the speaker screen because nobody's sitting here. The speaker is watching this. So I usually just lose that. I think that's fine. I think that's completely fine. Tomorrow and after tomorrow will be my speaker, my father. Oh really? But he's not speaking English. Oh, good. It's working? Yeah, it's okay. Oh, yeah. Sure. Now it's last turn. I'm so glad. There's also seating up in the balcony. If you can't find a seat, we'd encourage you to get a bird's eye view from up there.
Grand finale picture. for skills or attractive things about him that makes up for the shirt. You don't have anything else to make up for it, so you just have you do that shirt, that'd be it, you keep the shirt, which would be unacceptable. Oh, actually, can you do a little, I don't know, do a Instagram, just in the room. And that'll be a practice for the photo. While the lights go.
It's mine?
Huh?